I miss Solo.
Great movie. Great movie. If only they had a Disney Plus series sequel,
That'd be nice.
I
Put
would
it right
still
up
very
there.
much like that. What?
Put it right up there with Willow.
Exactly. Give me Willa, give me Solo. Both John Kasdan Productions. That man was cooking.
From the twisted mind of Ron Howard.
Just in mind of Ron Howard, John Kasdan, and his father, the other Kasdan. What's Larry Kasdan, right? So
Yeah, Lawrence Kasdan.
Lawrence Kasdan, Larry, close enough.
Laws.
Yeah, the laws. But yeah, we're here to celebrate the penultimate episode of The
You
Boy.
happy? You celebrating Soul's Dark Night of the Soul and you're laughing?
I was I was going through an emotional roller coaster going over the Acolyte episode 7 choices. And it was a great experience because I'm just like had my head in my hands, just like, what am I watching? What is happening? I actually really liked that it was soul focused. It was so soul focused. Because I didn't really expect that. I thought we were going to get like a lot of the Jedi POV, and we do. We got a lot of Torben and Dara, Kilnaka, and Soul. We get all their perspectives, of course, but it is centered around Soul's agency, Soul's decision making, his flaws really come to roost in this episode as we head into the season finale. Again, season finale. The show will have a season 2 for all those out there. I'm not going to be on there being so nervous. I am nervous. A deep part of me really wants or doesn't want what happened with Willow to happen to the Acolyte. But, looking at the Acolyte and the Andor streaming numbers, they're very similar to each other. The Acolyte is posting very similar numbers, if not better, to Andor. And then Andor, of course, got a season 2. I think Acolyte will get a season 2. Will it go beyond that? I hope it does, but we'll have to wait and see the numbers for season 2 and see where it goes from there. But if we can get 3 seasons of Mando, 2 seasons of Ahsoka coming in, 2 seasons of Andor, I would be shocked if this gets just 1 season, especially where they're going to leave off. Not saying like I know what happens, but like, yeah, we'll talk about it. There's a lot of answers that can't go answered in the finale. We have, thank you, unanswered in the finale.
But welcome to episode 116.
Yeah, episode 116. Wow, moving on up over the 100 centennial. What was the number for 15? I think I did 1. Yeah,
Quinceanera.
Quinceanera, one. Yeah. I took Spanish. I'm I forget the numbers. But anyways, 150, 116. That's very good. And speaking about other Disney Plus series, I think in terms of things that might not get a season 2, Skeleton Crew might not get a season 2. That seems like a limited series to me. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, in terms of the Acolyte, I'm very confident in its series potential for multiple seasons. But yeah, let's dive into it because this was like I said earlier, an emotional roller coaster for a lot of reasons. We're finally getting back into the secrets of Brendock. Kogonada once again returned to the director's chair. I forget who wrote it. Because again, different writers per different episodes for this show. But Kogonada was the main director. He was also director of episode 3 as well, called Destiny. This episode's called Choices, and I love that aspect. Just off the top, I like the title change or the title of this episode in general, because Destiny was really the title for episode 3, and that was centered around Osha's perspective. Osha's perspective within this coven of witches, or even Force users. I guess I don't even know if they're really called witches, but yeah, we'll just say witches coven. But either way, what I found fascinating is that in that episode, Anasaya really goes into the depths of what the thread is to Osha and May. And I think what I found was really interesting was about how even though Anastasia mentioned how you have to sacrifice part of yourself, and we'll get into that quote later on in the episode. But Anastasia says you have to sacrifice part of yourself to fully like evolve, etc. But she also talks to Osha about pulling the thread. What if you have a choice you want to make? Pull the thread. Basically, I'm paraphrasing. And this action, wow, this action of pulling the thread really is emblematic of Osha's choices. How her choice can affect her destiny. By pulling the thread, she is shaping her own destiny. The thread is really centered around the ideas of destiny and how individuals can take part of that destiny for themselves. At least that's what I took out of it. And what I found to be interesting about choices, and choices is more symbolic of the Force in a way. It's convoluted here, but work with me here. But in terms of choices or lack thereof, when it comes to the Force is less about destiny, at least in my opinion. And then, but the Force, as we know, especially in terms of the Jedi mindset, it's very much about the collective, this whole group, institutional collective mindset. The whole we are one with the cosmic force, as Jackie said. When somebody dies, they go away, go into the living force, etc. Like when you die, when you're alive, you're all part of the same cosmic force. There's less in emphasis on individuality, even though there still is, of course, especially in the High Republic. Different people have different interpretations of what the Force means to them. Avar sees it through song, Bell sees it through fire, flame, that kind of thing. But as an institution, the Force for them is still very much cosmic and collective, and it lives and breathes within all of us, as everyone says in A New Hope. And I like how Soul's choices affect the thread of Osha's destiny. He changes her fate completely in ways that we'll see in the finale. But as we can already see, her fate has forever been changed due to Soul's actions that night. And it's not primarily Soul, but Soul is a large part of the blame, as we see in this episode. Blame is a tough word, because a lot of individual things were involved here with Coral, Torben, and Soul, most importantly. But it's all a bunch of like the wheel of the comedic wheel of errors. What's it called? Spiral of errors, a comedy of errors, whatever it's called. It's just a lot of people making these messy mistakes around complex and convoluted means. But yeah, in general, I love this episode because it gets into the complicated irrational or rational thought process going on between Coral, Soul, and Dara. It's very fascinating how this episode 3 really get into our heads about how these two groups, Jedi and the Coven, interacted that one tragic night. And it all like spirals into chaos.
Yeah.
I loved it. I like this episode a lot. It wasn't my favorite episode, but I really liked it, especially on rewatch.
Yeah, it's very. I think this might be. I really can't quantify one episode. The whole series, Legion J, has been amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
But like the main moment, like toward the end, the choice, as it were, just the physical, emotional pain he's acting is immaculate.
It's so good. He go through so many emotions. What I love seeing about this was last week we mentioned how we're seeing a bit of Soul that we haven't seen before. This confused look of Soul when he slams down his fist on the Navicomputer. Before he talks to Osha, we just looks into the camera. We see a lot of anger, confusion, fear, sadness. Last week, we see that in spades here as a younger Soul who's much more fallible, much more flawed, much less put together than the Soul we saw in the future. And it's really interesting comparing and contrasting this Soul who's very much, I don't want to say conceited, confident in his own beliefs, however flawed they might be. And it was just so wild seeing Soul in this element where we're like, who is this person? Really, it's fascinating because throughout the episode, you can see in Dara, she has this trust within Soul. He's a respected person, but this one incident, changes things completely. And even though he eventually still becomes a very confident and trusted Jedi Master, it's just this one scene, this one episode really showcased Soul's, for lack of a better word, just craziness, his emotional infallibility. It's just, this guy was way more flawed than you like to see. And I think Leslie Headland said in another Collider or Nerdist interview, just like really capturing Soul's chaotic mindset during this time. It's very fascinating. And yeah, there are some interesting interviews I want to share throughout the episode that I remembered. So yeah. Can't wait. So yeah, let's dive into the episode here called Choices. Once again, I think it was very cool to call it Choices. I think there was a lack of choices going into our main characters, Osha and May. A lack of choices they had in this episode in what eventually became a tragic night for them. Osha and May had these ideals. May wanted to be closer to her sister, never wanting to lose her sister. That's May's dream. Osha's dream is wanting to become a Jedi, going away from her sister, away from her family. But unfortunately, because of Soul's actions, Coral's actions, all these adults' actions, May's dream of sticking with her sister is forever gone until 16 years later, where they can reunite. But even when they reunite, Osha has already been, again, lack of a better word here, but warped into not liking her own sister, disregarding her own family for the institution that raised her in the Jedi. Not great. But then even Osha's dream of becoming the Jedi, she gets it, but at what cost? And it doesn't last, unfortunately, which I keep mentioning. I mentioned that last week as well. It's just the big tragedy of this show is I went in thinking, episode 1 and 2, Osha's role is going to be reconnecting with the Force, reconnecting with her sister, becoming a Jedi again. And while she may reconnect with her sister in the finale, her days of being a Jedi ended, and I don't think she's becoming a Jedi again, even if she connects with the Force. So, it's just tragic. Their dreams when they were kids forever shattered because of the choices they did not have. When the episode starts, I love the lack of dialogue. It's a lot of establishing shots on Brendok 16 years ago. As we see Torpin, Soul, and Dara Kanaka performing basically field experiments, science experiments on Brendok. Eventually, we'll come to learn that there is a vergence on Brendok, but for now, it's just a very cool establishing shots of them just peacefully living on the land. Nathan, they were always here, which was kind of surprising. They didn't just come to Brendok and burst through the witch's doors and say, "Give me your children." They were
a couple months.
It's been exactly a couple of months. I think they say
7 weeks.
7 weeks. Wow, I'm an idiot. I have it on my notes. 7 weeks. Torben wants to return home, but yeah, 7 weeks, and they've been here a long 7 weeks without seeing the kids at all. I mean, these witches are very good at hiding these kids out. It takes
they must have
one
landed
day.
really fucking far.
They must have, yeah. But they did a lot of again cool establishing shots. Brendok is very filled with a lot of woodlands and forests. So it's very possible.
It's very also possible like they surveyed like a certain amount of distance and was like, all right, we're gonna move camp a little bit more this way, get that semblance.
Good point, because there's one scene later on or coming up where they're like, hey, go down the river. We didn't scan that area yet. So it's like you said, it could just be expanding their perimeter the more they go. But they've been there for 7 weeks. Torben immediately says how he wants to return home to Coruscant.
Which I do not blame the man.
Me neither, especially with the field work that they're doing. It's like I don't blame them or him for having these thoughts. It's very childish, but he's a child.
Yeah.
And he's a Padawan. And this isn't the first time High Republic fans, immediately after the episode aired, a lot of people were comparing him to one of my favorite characters in the High Republic called Reith, forgetting his last name, Vitus, Reith, whatever his name is, Reith. one of my favorite characters. He's very book smart. He likes staying in Coruscant so he can read books, go to the Coruscant Jedi archives, the Jedi library. He doesn't like going on like these super long space missions, but his master really teaches him to embolden himself, search for these new horizons per se, and take in the adventure, which he does in his first book called Into the Dark. If people are just getting into the High Republic, I recommend reading Light of the Jedi and Into the Dark, because they're very good books. One adult, one middle grade novel. Young adult. But yeah, he's been there 7 weeks. Troy wants to go back. Again, very similar. We've seen this before. And they mentioned, and Dara mentions, how Brendock thrived. There was life that thrived after a hyperspace incident. Nathan, 30 seconds to countdown.
30 minutes, 90 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 fucking year later.
Did you ever finish Light of the Jedi? How far did you get, motherfucker?
I got a little bit, and then there was the gap, and then I got like I think I got like 7+ chapters in, and I thought
you were further along than that.
I think I was. It was what I last remember is there was a couple of Jedi who were stationed, I think, on the planet where the collision was coming.
Yeah, Hetzel.
Yeah, I think there was a couple of Jedi there who I think it was the Master and Padawan who are.
Okay, yeah. He probably got to the Avar chapter, or you could be thinking about the other planet.
I definitely met Avar, I think.
Yeah, you met Avar because he helped divert the disaster.
Yeah, I think that's last. The last bit I remember is the Jedi were like, "Can we grab it?"
Yeah, which is so cool. But this was really cool, guys. If you have not read High Republic, this hyperspace disaster jumpstarts the era, or at least the audience's journey into the High Republic in the novels, because there was a big ship. It's going through hyperspace, but I don't want to get into spoilers, but for some reason it gets pulled out of hyperspace and it blows up within hyperspace, and shrapnel, debris, parts of the ship go spiraling across the galaxy, because again, it's in hyperspace. It's coming out of different spaces, different parts of the galaxy. One of the major regions was Hetzel. Yeah.
Think of like a satellite hitting, get a satellite being hit in our atmosphere and like the debris spinning around that, but spread throughout the hyperspace lanes.
Exactly. Across the hyperspace lane, across the galaxy. And the Jedi had to hurry up and come rescue civilians on those planets. And it really ruined a lot of planets. It really changed things. But also, we see here, might have helped some planets like Brendock thrive. Why is Brendock thriving when other planets have been ravaged in the past by this hyperspace incident? And we learn in this episode because there is a vergence, which we'll get into, because, wow, that was surprising. I love that. I love that Leslie's getting into that crazy Star Wars lore. But what do you think? So I was playing it first, and Dara, teaches Torben to, like, it's okay. She doesn't say it's okay. On the contrary, she's like, being mindful of, like, why you're here, basically. Trying to not reprimand him, but also just reinforce why he's here in the first place. And that's when Soul comes in and explains it's a vergence. It's a concentration of force energy like they have found here. Sometimes people say it could create life. What we see on this planet is a power to be studied, protected. It is a noble mission, he says. There's a lot there. There were some people online who didn't like how Indar was teaching or responding to Torben here, which I get. I mean, as a non-Jedi, it seems very cold. It's coming across like, be mindful of why you're here. Do not say these things. Basically commit. Commit to your role as a Jedi. Even if it's boring work. And for us, like, man, that must be boring work, pulling up weeds and vegetation, all that kind of stuff, greenery.
7 weeks,
for 7 weeks, exactly. Seems menial labor for no big goal that he can at least visualize. And I get it, but also when Dara can't really, and she expresses this as much, like, She doesn't want to. She tells Soul this later on, but she doesn't want to give him all the answers. And I find that fascinating because, again, that is something very High Republic like, or even just Jedi like in general. Obi-Wan doesn't give all the answers to Luke right away, for better or for worse. But then, like, in general, even in Rebels, the Kanan Ezra dynamic, like Ezra is such a new Jedi. Kanan is much more experienced per se. And even he doesn't say certain things to Ezra, and Ezra gets angry at Kanan, all that kind of stuff. But it's always about Jedi really wanting their Padawans to experience and train for themselves why they're making these choices, and hopefully they can come to learn and respect those choices. It's exactly what happens to Reith again in the High Republic, where he becomes to be like, okay, I understand what my master is saying. He still has that proclivity to go back to Coruscant and stay on Coruscant and not go to the Outer Worlds, but he's much more confident in himself that he can just survive in the Outer Worlds. And Torben might have come to a positive decision, and not a reckless one, if it wasn't for what happened when they go to the Coven.
Yeah,
but yeah. Well, what'd you think about Indara in that scene and the whole episode in general?
I definitely felt Indara was, like, my initial feeling was like she's quite cold.
Yeah.
But I also, she even says as much early on. It's like she's just trying to guide Torben to find the answers for himself, which I can respect for sure. I mean, I think it's all about like tonality. Like some people respond differently to the way something's said in a certain way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think all in all, especially with the full perspective of the episode, like you can see like Indara is only like of like the best possible outcome for everybody. She's not, you can even see by the very end, she's not completely cold, because she calls Soul out like, no, fuck the rules of facing the council. You ruined this little girl's life, and you're gonna take the last thing she may have. No.
Yeah, it's very tragic, and I've rewatched that final scene so many times between her and Soul, because you can see the anger just bubbling up when she's been so considerate to Soul's actions throughout the entire episode. We'll go through each time, but yeah, she very much is trusting. They're friends, and it doesn't lead to the best things. So it's like when you're best friends with somebody and your friend makes a tragic mistake, or what you think is a mistake, what you think is another mistake, what you think is another mistake, and it leads to a very tragic incident. It's just like, who is this person who I thought was my best friend this whole time? And that's really what gets her so angry, because like, I trusted you, you did all this shit, like, But anyways, at the end here, I want to circle in on this factor, and this factor is going to reign in for the whole episode here. When Soul tells Torben again, this is a noble mission. While that is true, while discovering life on Brendok, trying to decipher the meaning of this virgins, a power the Jedi are not aware of, power to create life, which is very fascinating that Jedi are so unfamiliar with it. I wonder if I have the quote from Leslie somewhere, but she compares and contrasts how the Jedi, they're so unfamiliar with the witch's powers and the power to create life. It's so frightening to them. On the other hand, this is what the Sith crave. They crave this kind of power to create life. They crave power of eternity, creating life. And it's so funny because Jedi are so disregarding, indifferent towards attachments. Of course, we know this. Certain attachments, right? They profess that you'd be close with people, that you understand, you empathize with the everyday person, but also you can't get too close. And that can also lead to a lot of troubles with certain people. But it's so funny how they're so indifferent towards attachments, at the same time that causes them to be so fearful of the creation of life, the manipulation of force to create life. While the Sith are much more lax with their rules, and they're much more like excited about the ability to create life, which is why, maybe Kymir or his master were so fascinated by the virgins on Brendok for completely different reasons than the Jedi. The Jedi want to learn, the Sith want to control the ability of the virgins. And it leads to different things here. So, yeah. And then in general, so yeah, what I wanted to get across though before I got sidelined was that the noble mission that the Jedi want here or the noble mission that Soul wants here is really going to take over his whole life. While Torben is the one that is unbalanced, he's very disturbed. And Dara later says to Soul in a later scene here, he says, Torben was unbalanced, yes, but Indara says, Soul, you were also disturbed late last night during that scene when you talked back to Torben. And from the start, Soul was just as restless as Torben. He just didn't show it in an obvious showcase. And he wasn't restless to go home as Torben was. Soul, from the beginning, was restless because, in my opinion, he believed this whole mission to be a noble mission. And while it is, Soul is really putting up and reinforcing the nobility of this, mission that could go literally anywhere. It's a virgins in the forest. It's kind of hard to calculate, hence being there for 7 weeks. It's been a long time. Maybe it's getting to a person unsupervised as Soul. And he wants to really emphasize how noble it is and his noble intentions, his noble means, his ideal to make this mission be much more important than it might be already for the Jedi. His ideal for that is going to create a lot of problems when it comes to his connections with Osha and his connections with the dangers of the Coven. Like, this mission is so noble, and that word is important because he says it again towards the end. Like, we're here for noble intentions. And yeah, Soul, you are, but all the chaos that you lay it across, this whole episode, you can't just hide behind noble intentions. But that's what he is. That's what he's doing for the entire episode. Yeah. So yeah, it's just important to state at the beginning. So yeah, and then that's when she said, "That's why I have a Padawan and you do not." He is restless. I know it's very funny. She kind of laughs it off. It's a very comedic scene, the way Soul kind of reacts to that. Just like, okay, you got jokes, okay. He pulled the Denzel. Okay. Yeah. I put you in Guantanamo Bay. No, I'm kidding. We should really watch.
Ain't got shit.
Yeah, on me. Yeah, we should watch Training Day.
I've never seen it.
Classic. Oh, you haven't? Oh, wow. It is one of my favorite movies.
I need more Denzel in my life for sure.
Oh yeah, we gotta watch. We gotta go do a Denzel marathon. Inside Man, Malcolm X. I mean, Malcolm X might not be the best commentary, but it is very good.
Equalizer.
Training Day. You never seen Equalizer?
I once a while back saw the first Equalizer and seen them.
Like the sequel. The second one was pretty meh, but the third one's actually pretty dang good. But I've seen it like 3 or 4 times now because I saw it in theaters. I saw it with my mom. Then I saw it with my dad. And then I saw it with a friend. I'm like, I've seen this movie way more times than I should have.
I will say, I think maybe 30 times I have seen an ad to subscribe to Stars for a clip of the Equalizer 2. And the amount of times I've been like, you're going to ask her if she got home okay.
Yeah.
Did you get home okay? No, she didn't.
Yeah. I mean, Stars needs to pair it up with a different service because all these different streaming services, why would I go to Stars that's so minuscule when it comes to their library? Yeah. Anyways. But yeah, so Soul was really restless, and that restlessness can be part of him wanting a connection. Like I mentioned, it's fueled upon noble intentions. He's doing this because he has noble reasons, noble intentions. He's trying to make this mission much more important than it already is. On top of that, as a Jedi, as a male Jedi, there's a part of him that might just also want emotional attachment, this emotional connection. Again, the Jedi, while a lot of Jedi that I like, the interesting ones basically in the High Republic era, have these emotional connections to these other Jedi and other people in general. And for Soul, he doesn't really have that or hasn't had that. And as he grows up, I don't want to say it's like a midlife crisis or anything, but it's just like in a Jedi kind of funny way it is, where he's yearning a connection in this institution that kind of trained from having these deep connections. He yearns for a connection with somebody. And that connection is, in this case, a Padawan. And Osha is the perfect being to fit right into his ideals there. Or his wishes, his desires, right?
Yeah.
And we always talk about for Jedi, they really have to minimize their own desires. We talked about this with Osha in episode 6 when Kymir's like, your fear, your anger, your desires. These are things that lead to the dark side. Like why? I mean, yes and no. It's very messy, complex. Why I love Star Wars. But Osha it really hurt her how she couldn't act on her desires, her desire to be with her family, mainly because they were all dead because of Soul and Indara. But also because of the lie that the Soul built and how her desires to just talk and connect with her family wasn't really, acted upon or taught by the Jedi. They were like the opposite. Move on from it, grow and move on. But Osha was unable to do that, which really stunted her growth. That's why she's such a passive character. And Soul here in the past is very not passive. He's very aggressive in a lot of ways, but he's very restless because he really he's really liked Torben. He's probably getting bored, in my opinion. And he also wants a Padawan. He's yearning for connection. And if The Last of Us taught us anything, it's, love can come in a lot of different ways, but there are unforeseen dangers of love and close connections as well. People will do a lot of, things they think is right in the name of love and connections. Anyways, Soul comes across May and Osha under the willow tree. And it's very mythological the way this is working about. It's very, again, I mentioned episode 6 and 5 and every episode of the show, which is why I love it. It's very fairy tale-esque. These two princesses of Brendok are under the tree using the Force, and there's I love Soul, but it's a creepy dude leaning against a tree and looking what these girls are doing. It's weird. It's weird. And it's funny because when we theorized, like when in episode 3, when Coral's like, you don't know who's watching, people are like, oh, is it a Sith or something like that? But by episode 3, we realized it was Soul. And even with the backstory, we realized like, oh, it's even more weirder the way the Soul was just watching them. And he doesn't just go back. He continues watching them for the whole day as he watches them go back to the forest, get caught by Coral, and then he continues tracking them all the way to their home. And it doesn't stop there. Even though he does like say, Indara, can you read me? He doesn't go back to the ship. He goes and continues to go to the compound. And when he gets to the compound, he's just scaling the compound. It's like, again,
that was intense, yeah.
Very intense, very weird. He has this innate connection.
Yeah, I will say like at the initial start of like Soul's following, I kind of get it because they hadn't seen any like sign of life for like we said 2 months.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh hey, big breakthrough. Who are these people? Where are they coming from? What's the situation? It's like, okay, I can understand the scoping. Though the commitment to scale a mountain is immeasurable, and I'm like, holy shit. But I don't care because I'm an audience member and I want answers. But
me too. I was like, what does he see here? What's his perspective throughout all of this? And his perspective is one of shock and fear as he sees. Well, in the willow tree, it's all May being like, "Boom," with the Force, and Osha's like, "Stop it, May! What are you doing?" Of course, he came too late to see that Osha was doing the same exact thing to the butterfly, but not in a malicious way. But May bad, weird. What's it called? He also sees them. He's shook and fearful because he comes across the Anastasia training sequence from episode 3, where she's telling the girls to block. She uses a Force / the thread, and they both fall down. And Soul's like, "Oh wow." Like they're using the Force, but this isn't the Force that I'm familiar with. The girls got pushed onto the ground. They're in danger. They're not treating them like kids. They're training. They're like gearing up, it looks like. Again, I'm paraphrasing what's in Soul's mind. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's like from his perspective, he sees an adult pushing 2 little kids onto the ground. That really escalates his fear and his shock. Of course, that we know by this point, episode 3, Anastasia just got done explaining the concepts of the thread, which he completely missed. And if he did stay, he'd come to realize the thread and the Force are fairly similar. It just, in my opinion, they are different in the way that Anastasia explains it to Osha and May. When I say explains it, I think Anastasia, especially that one shot in episode 3, where it's them three, not in the training sequence, but when like with the sun beaming down on them in the
room
in Osha's room. That sequence where she again explains the Force and explains how to Osha the importance of sticking together. In that sequence, she says like, you'll come across a time when you all have to pull the thread again, differing how the Force is more collective and the thread is more individual. The soul was afraid, and it's very in a metaphorical, symbolical, I guess, sense. Soul, by coming across this and shaking up Osha's destiny, he's kind of breaking her chance to actively pull that thread, at least when she's 8. Again, I think this is all teeing up for Osha finally pulling the thread, making a choice in the finale. And that choice is neither going to be Jedi, tragically enough, nor Sith. I don't think she'd be like, Chimera, call me Darth Anastasia or whatever it's called.
It's not gray.
It's not going to be great, even though she did wear gray clothing, right? But I think that's more just emotionally where she's at, not in a title sense for like gray Jedi. So yeah, she's not going to be Jedi nor Sith. Again, I think that's my prediction. I think she'll go somewhere else with Chimera. We had a lot of good theories last week, and I think they're pretty much going to stay the same. But we'll rephrase it again at the end of this episode to get audiences caught up on our thoughts. But yeah, Soul was basically afraid. He's shocked by what he's seeing. He's ripping away her destiny by the end of this episode. We'll get to that again. But Torben, it's nighttime at this point when Soul gets on his way back. And Torben's like, what the heck? You think they're Night Sisters? After Soul has already explained to them what they are, Torben thinks that they're Night Sisters, which is very funny because that's what a lot of audiences thought, watching the trailers. They're like, oh, witches, boom, Night Sisters. Which is, again, very funny. I love when the show can really get into audiences' mindsets. Kind of like when Mog was kind of like, oh, it must be something else. It can't just be the Sith because while the audiences think it's Sith, people in the universe think it's completely something else. But in this case, the audiences are in sync with Torben. It's like, oh, it could be Night Sisters. But as we know, they're not. And as Indara states, Night Sisters don't really train younglings. They don't really do X, Y, and Z. So it says, anyways, they aren't treating the girls like children. Which is probably the funniest line in the entire series / episode, because Soul, that's exactly what you're doing. It's very funny. It's like he's not treating Osha as a child here. Or in a way, he's treating her too much like a child, making or like emphasizing that she has no choice in the matter when she does. She says as much to Anastasia.
Yeah, I kind of would get the sense from Soul that like his fear of the unknown, in the sense of like not knowing what this coven is what's causing his irrational mindset. Because even like from the jump, like this woman approaches, who granted looks quite different from Ocean May, and it's like, and he's pretty like out of earshot enough to where like the dialogue's a bit muffled. He can't really pick up what's being said, but you can see by body language, it's kind of an agitated figure who's pulling these children back to a lock-in compound, and it's like you're not supposed to be out here type deal. And on the outskirts, you could be like, oh, are these kids okay? Like, are they all right? And then as he infiltrates more, it's just like, what is going on here? They have some sort of force ability, but not one I'm familiar with. What is happening here? I'm concerned for the safety of these children who don't know anybody.
Exactly. Again, that's the thing. Like he says at the like you said at the end there, he thinks they don't know any better. When in episode 3, we constantly get reinforced to us that while they are children, Osha does know better. She knows her way of life, and she kind of wants to leave that way of life. She has a very active mindset when she is young. She actively wants to leave. She actively doesn't want to lie. She actively talks to May, says like, I don't want to do all this. So Osha is a very active person in her past, which gets again stopped in the future. But yeah, again, like it's like they don't treat them like children. It's like, no, you don't treat them like you're treating them as like your property or something that you kind of need to gain. That you need Osha to come to your side. That you're so fearful of them, irrationally so, that it makes you think of them not as their own individual people with choices. Because what would have happened if Osha, which is why the episode is so great, because there's a lot of like what if scenarios. It gives rise to a lot of what if scenarios, and like, what if Osha didn't want to leave? Like that would have complicated things even more so, because his fear for their safety would have still been there. This fatherly fear, and I think we haven't referenced that much in this episode, but Anastasia is very much the big mother figure, which tragically in Star Wars doesn't work out for a lot of mother characters. Mothers tend to die in Star Wars, but while that's not great, narratively so, mothers dying is very common in fairy tales, in mythology. Why aren't there a lot of mothers in Disney movies? Why did Walt Disney kill off a lot of mothers in movies? Cinderella, where's her mom at? Bambi, where's her mom at? Mulan, where's her mom at? Like, why Belle, where's her mom at? Right?
Is Mulan's mom? Isn't she there?
No, Mulan lives with her father, who's in the army. I
thought her whole family was there. And the worry is her dad going off to war.
Oh, you're right. Mulan's a different story. But yeah, Belle, Cinderella. Who's the other one? Snow White, for example.
Ariel.
What?
Ariel.
Yeah, Ariel's a big one.
Where are all of the mothers, frankly, of that different breed of mermaids?
Exactly. Yeah.
Triton, who are you?
Triton, no.
I'm starting to feel like Soul over here.
Yeah, what's going on?
Okay? Why can't Ariel go to the surface?
Triton has a lot of daughters. They all look very different.
Go watch our commentary for Little Mermaid.
We did talk about that. Like, oh, what's going on here? What do you mean by that? But anyways, I think it was important to come across here. I think that what George Lucas and Walt Disney, what they're really emphasizing here is that like these mother characters are usually very protective and very, protective, motherly towards their children. And in some cases, that's a good thing. But in some cases, that kind of like, that motherly protection is something that needs to be avoided or grown up upon or moved forward upon, advanced upon, so that the children can grow. It's then the father figure who becomes the next hurdle in that challenge. And for a heroine's journey, it's moving past the fatherly figure, right? Accepting the fatherly role or accepting the father in the situation, but learning from them and moving beyond what the fathers think is right. Again, like Ariel moving past Triton, and then Belle like accepting the beast, not being afraid, because when her father or whoever's taking care of Belle, when he comes back, it's like, oh, he's frightened because of his interaction with the beast. And Belle's like, she's scared because of his interaction. She cares for him. But at the same time, if she just listened to him, she would have met Beast, and that her life would have never, progressed. Like as it was supposed to. She was supposed to meet the Beast, confront her fear. And in this case, Osha really, I think, again, teasing the finale, she has to confront the father figure. Especially after the death of the mother figure, which already did irreparable damage to Osha. Just like the death of the mother did a lot of bad things to Anakin.
It's just like a lot of times, like the mothers are often depicted as like such a level of like comfort and safety, and that being taken away from the character throws them into disarray.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Like the mother's comfort and safety throws them into disarray. But sometimes that disarray is, leads to bad consequences that we see like Anakin. Is something he couldn't get over. But that's mainly because the Jedi weren't the right support system for him.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Osha gets thrown into disarray when her family gets wiped out. Jedi, not the great support system. She leaves, comes across Chimera, who ironically becomes a better support system for Osha, accepting her desires.
As we said last week, Chimera, if he wasn't killing people, pretty good.
Pretty good. Exactly, which makes the show so funny. Enemies to lovers is so appealing because it's like, they're usually the enemies are usually bad people. They've killed people. But their love is something that can transcend both of them. But going back to Osha and Soul here, Osha really has to confront Soul. And what made this episode so impactful is that we're really seeing the fatherly, I don't want to say menace, because I make that Soul seem like a very bad person. He's not. But it's like the fatherly control, the fatherly aggression that we see from Soul, doing all these to protect the kids. Because again, they were never really in danger. But protect the kids are in danger. He's fearful of them. And again, it's very Jedi-like, but it's also very Soul, in particular to Soul's character, to be afraid. Because Indara doesn't have these same fears. And the Jedi Council don't either when they say, come back here, which we'll get to. But it's very much Soul, very much this father figure who has these fears. But anyways, sorry. Yeah. But they go to the mine. Before that, they don't treat the girls like children. He's filled with fear. He doesn't understand them. And Dara trusts Soul so much. And when Dara says, like, okay, I see what you're saying. Let me go ask the council. But he's like, no, we can't wait. We can't wait. Our Wi-Fi sucks. We can't wait. He's like, you have to see what I've seen. Trust me. And I love, again, we're watching the episode. You can really dig into Carrie-Anne Moss's facial language each time Soul asks her to do something or have faith in him. Trust me, Indara, and see what I have seen. And she's like, okay, we'll go. So she trusts him. We're gonna check this out. No harm, no foul. We'll check it out. They go there, but then Indara's like, I'll go in alone. Soul's like, no, we should go as a group. And Indara's like, if we go as a group, it's a lot more threatening. And again, it's very cop-like. But by the way, my dad loved this episode. This is his favorite episode of this season. And he said, like, Soul is really much acting like a cop this episode. I'm like, in a lot of ways, yes. A lot of like, people have been calling Jedi cops from the beginning of the season, but like in this case, he's working on a lot of these irrational fears, which is
you're in too deep. You're off the case.
Basically, he should have been off the case.
The case he started in day.
Yeah, exactly. It was
12 hours. You're in too deep.
It was far too late. Yeah. But yeah, I was like,
funny. I will say it is kind of funny because a bit later, Indara calls Soul out again for like saying like he's too like emotionally like invested in this, or Soul kind of retaliates like that's not what's happening here. He's very defensive. Mm-hmm. But I will say I think I read that scene personally a bit different than most probably do.
How'd you read that scene?
Like I'm sure like a lot of people were like, oh, look at Soul being so obviously too invested on the case, but I was kind of a mindset of we see how the Jedi are a bit more emotionally reserved, and I genuinely felt Soul was absolutely like worried about the safety of these kids, and he was like worried that the roadblock mindset of the Jedi way was getting in the way for the actual like aid of these kids he may think were actually in a danger that we don't understand, which that's the whole problem of the episode is like they don't understand anything about this coven, which led to the unfortunate mishap with Anna Sayat later. But I do believe Soul genuinely wasn't like, this isn't about my emotions. I want to protect these people that are in danger. That's what the Jedi should be doing, right? Is saving people who can't save themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it all comes from that paternal need or paternal feel he has for them. Like this, like, they're in danger. I sense a bit of danger. On top of him sensing the connection, the whole conversation comes across after he says, I have a connection with her. And
that is to say, I can see like both can be true at the same time.
exactly. But I think even Leslie mentioned it, and I was talking about it with my dad. I'm like, that's what makes his comparison to Qui-Gon, even though my dad totally forgot who Qui-Gon was. His connection to Qui-Gon is so interesting because Qui-Gon, basically, like Leslie mentioned, also has an immediate connection to Anakin. He comes to Tatooine, and he's like, the Phantom Menace shows it. He's connected with Anakin. Him and Anakin have a larger purpose. He wants Anakin to be his Padawan. But Sol and Qui-Gon are very different, even though they both think that Anakin's / Osha aren't in a great place. They need to be taken away from dangerous place, Tatooine, slavery, not great. But while Qui-Gon comes across more, calmly, and states his case in front of the Jedi more calmly. Sol goes about things in a much more messy, and unfortunate way.
So Sol's charisma ranking is not as high as Qui-Gon's.
Exactly. Qui-Gon would have handled the situation completely differently, which is why the show is so good, because like Sol is such a unique character.
It is funny how smooth Qui-Gon is when you like think back to him. He's just like, oh yeah, we're just passing by, need a ship, play a chance, make a bet.
Yeah. And even then, he has a conversation with the mom. The mom, similar to Anastasia, realizes Anakin's place is not with her. Even though it's still not great, there's still a big flaw in Qui-Gon not being able to save, the mom in that situation. Like, again, you don't have to keep Anakin with the mom, but saving the mom out of slavery, or not even doing his best to keep the mom there. There's a whole dice thing where he's like, okay, you can keep the mom, but I need Anakin, kind of thing. And that's still a flaw from Qui-Gon, on Qui-Gon's part. But he's still willing to talk with the mom about like Anakin's decision. Anakin wants to leave. The mom agrees. They say goodbye. It's very tragic and sad because we know what's coming. But it's like Sol doesn't have that conversation with Anastasia. Like, by the time Sol is there to have that conversation, he illegally enters the compound, which sparks a lot of violence. And Coral is for a lot of mistakes there too. She sparks a lot of violence on her end too. But again, chicken or the egg. Coral wouldn't have had to respond violently if the Jedi didn't approach in a violent-ish manner. So it's all messy. But yeah, what's it called here? When they're talking, and we're getting a redo of the scene here as they come in as a group. And again, Indara defers. Like I said, we'll go in as a group. We don't have to go in individually. So 2 times in a row, Indara infers to Sol. She didn't want to enter the compound in the first place. Sol's like, let me just show you. They get there. And again, she defers to Sol by saying, we'll go in as a group, but, be cool, calm, and collected about it. Enter the sequence, and Sol just shows his lightsaber to Osha. I'm just like, oh my gosh.
You pulled it out? You pulled out the weapon?
It's like, what are you doing, Sol? But, again, Sol has a connection. He feels like he can do this because, there's a connection between him and Osha. But meanwhile, what made this scene so fascinating is that in episode 3, we saw Anastasia having a full-on conversation with Indara. While this is happening, she's able to possess Torben in one of the most unsettling and awesome scenes I've seen of the series so far, where she peers into Torben's mind in a very seductive and interesting way that I really loved it.
Yeah, it was very. Oh, there was also like a really compelling element to it of like vampire lore, which I love. Is like there's a sense like you have to be invited in to take control.
Yes,
like you don't have the ability to just like overtake the soul. The soul has to willingly give up control.
That's yeah, great point there. I love the vampire symbolism there, the aesthetic of it all. Whereas it's very vampires have this the notion of vampires is to just like force themselves on people, but a lot of the times in terms of like vampiristic lore, there's a lot of choice involved there, depending on of course your interpretation, and in the semblance of control. And yeah, there's a lot of vampire tendencies. I think vampires also fit Chimera very well. I mentioned that last week.
I think I was. You remember? I wasn't too big on was it Renfield? But a hilarious gag where Draco just kind of comes into his apartment. Is like, what? Fuck, how? Why? And he remembers he has a welcome mat on the front door. Like, fuck.
Yeah. And it was what's cool, like you said, what's cool about this is that while she possesses Torben, while Torben still goes like black in the eyes, it's not until Torben accepts her into his mind when he says, what are the words here? She says, ask me what you truly desire. And that's when he says, I want to return home. And that's when, like, click, she gets in, she says kneel, and he kneels. She has to ask for permission. But what I found so funny here, interesting, was when she peers into Torben's mind, the way she talks about him was like, she says, you're feeling trapped and you're suppressing your natural desires. I'm like, this is, again, like this whole show is about characters, especially Jedi, having to suppress their natural desires. This wasn't just taught to Osha. And that isn't just like what Chimera is saying about Osha. This is a play on all the Jedi. All the Jedi are suppressive of their natural desires.
They're so horny, Evan.
They are. I'm reading this book again. Fantastic High Republic book called Temptation of the Force. These Jedi are horny, but again, they have to be like, I love this character, I love this other Jedi, but what do I do? You know, it's like it's hard. And literally, in another comic, Jedi just left the Order. I'm just like, oh, it's peak. And I think a lot of the High Republic gets into these Jedi and these complicated emotions, but it stems from suppressing your desires, which again is a flaw of the Jedi Order. Which again is it's a flaw that's always been there, just like the flaw of like taking kids at a young age. Granted, a lot of the mothers willingly do that, so it's a mixed flaw. But either way, because by the way, just a short tangent. I've seen a lot of people say like the Jedi are evil have always been, bad because they've always taken children. And while the taking children aspect isn't great, a lot of the time it's like these are kids with magical abilities who need to be trained on said magical abilities.
There's an interesting case, I think, with like the Jedi's age rule that I think is rather smart on the Jedi's side of things, is like, taking them when they're so young that they haven't developed as much of attachments, versus like when you look at Osha or Anakin being of that age, it's like they've grown to love and connect with their family so deeply that like they will miss them and they will like want to leave and go back.
But that to counter that's Jedi's fear. They have a fear of like, they have this attachment to people. If the Jedi can healthily be like, your brother, your mother, your sister, your father, you still have those, you recognize those, but you also can compartmentalize. You're mature enough to understand your emotions, and we can help you train for that, right? To understand that more. The Jedi, on the other hand, are fearful of that. Instead of like acknowledging that, what are they doing? They're suppressing that. That's why they have these kids, so they can just move past the suppression part and just be like, we're your found family now. And that's what Star Wars is all about, found family, which is good.
It is funny. Like if we just had like a healthy outlet.
Right.
If we just had a guidance counselor at the temple.
that's what it comes down to, because there's, and again, it's a bad thing, but it's also not a bad thing, because there's still a lot of fantastic Jedi, fantastic characters that came across from being that they don't even know their own family, like Obi-Wan, for example. Obi-Wan's not a bad person for not knowing who his own brother is, but an argument is to be made. He could have been a better Jedi, could have been a better character overall by acknowledging his family and still moving past that and recognizing like, it's like going off to college, right? It's like, or high school or school in general, elementary schools. Like, I recognize my family, but this institution, this school is also healthy for me, and they can teach me things my family can't teach me. Which is what the Jedi are for. We can teach you things your family is just unaware of. There's hundreds, thousands of us who can teach you about the Force and things your family can't teach you. That's
But
good.
I think
But
that's
yeah,
like where the line gets drawn, right? Is like because you don't
exactly.
really get you don't really get the sense of like the Jedi are anticipating you ever really going back to the family.
Exactly. Yeah, which can get very messy. But yeah, that's why the concept of the Jedi is so interesting. But I say that because like even in the Rey movie, for example,
Mm-hmm.
you would assume we'll see how the Rey movie does, but you would assume Rey's not like taking children at a young age. If that happened, I'd be like, oh, did we not learn anything? Because it feels like that's still a flaw.
What I
And
would love is if
yeah.
Rey was able to like, what if there is no like just set temple, right? What if Rey is just a
Oh.
traveler visiting the families and like stationed for a bit, help guide the children on a path,
Oh.
move on to the next.
That's an interesting take. I didn't think about that. I would like that. Kind of like a merchant style Jedi
Yeah.
path where it's just like constantly traveling.
Or at
That'd
least
be
to the
very
point, or at least to the point of like having trained up some people to then station at these bits because Rey having to devote a few years per planet, that's a bit long form, but
yeah, it is. And but what I'm hoping for also is just like she wants people who want to come to her, right?
yes.
They're making the choice to come to Rey. Rey's not saying like, "Give me your babies" because they need to be trained with me. They need to be trained by me. It's like no, like when they come to an age, they'll know about me and what I did 15 years ago.
Yeah.
If you're ready, come to me. Which I
That's
think is what
essentially
Luke does, right?
yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think that'll be like the more intriguing aspect of building a new order is like how are you different from the one before? I mean, granted also that gets interesting if like what sins will be repeated, but also what's being acknowledged because even like from the Last Jedi, both Luke and Rey are bouncing off ideas of like what the Council previously did in the old order, but like how can we change that? How can we move forward differently?
Exactly. And we figured the sequel trilogy would talk about that. But in my opinion, Tross doesn't really discuss the flaws of the order in a way that I was expecting, or at least, starting something new and changing it. But, with this new Rey movie, this is a perfect chance to fix that and talk about like, okay, now Rey learned from Luke, who learned from the Council. Council flawed. Luke tried his best, also a little bit flawed in terms of Ben. How is she going to learn from Luke? And that's very, very intriguing. I hope, I'm not holding my hopes up too high with how they handled with Tross, but I hope that they can still talk about the flaws and sins of the past. Because I think that could lead to some, I talked about with somebody else, like what can be antagonists for the Rey movie. And I think simply somebody who has the Force, who matures, young adult version, and doesn't want to go to Rey. They feel like what they can do is a lot stronger or a lot better or something like that. And Rey has to, fight against that if that leads down to the bad side, especially. Because Rey is just one person. She's not a whole order. How is she supposed to maintain people across the galaxy who are coming across powers that they're unfamiliar with? And I think, that'd be very interesting. But yeah, I say all that to say, small tangent aside, it stems from the High Republic and how the Jedi are handling these suppressive desires. But I love the scene so much. It's very seductive, very cool the way Jodie Turner-Smith plays that Anastasia role. And then she prays on his wish to return to Coruscant. He says he wants to. He asks her, or he tells him to ask her. She does, and then that's when Indara takes notice. But then back on the ship, like you mentioned, this really that's where we get to the fascinating scene of Soul being like, or Indara's like, "Very Soul, very funny, very cool idea of you wanting to train the kids. It gives us just enough time to contact the Order and actually make a correct decision." And Soul's like, "Oh, I wasn't kidding. No, I actually do really want to train the kids." And Indara's like, "Oh, wait, no, wait, pause. I thought we were on the same wavelength. We are not on the same wavelength here." And again, I wrote my notes here, like Soul just has like this immediate connection to Osha, similar to Qui-Gon has with Anakin. We already talked about that. But also Soul, he said, what I noticed here was that Soul is fearful of May's marking, which is very weird of Soul. because we saw it in episode 3, but we see it again here in episode 7 when he's talking to the kids and he looked at May's mark in comparison to Osha, who has no mark. And he immediately says to Indara here that May has a marking, and Indara's like, so you're thinking like if they both have this marking, or you're thinking that Osha doesn't have this marking because we stopped in the middle of their ceremony. And Soul is kind of like, well, yes, basically. And he's very worried for what may happen to Osha because May already has the marking. I mentioned this because this is the beginning of Soul. We talk about the heartbreaking choice at the end of this episode. But this is really where we learn Soul has already made his choice. He comes in talking in the hallway, saying, I have this connection to Osha. Yeah. May has a marking. It's very much just showcasing how he already is preferring one over the other. And his choice is basically already made by the time he gets to that crucial choice. And then this is where it gets the good dialogue here. He says, who's protecting this child? Again, only saying child, Osha. Who's protecting this child if not the Jedi? I'm like, that's such a loaded question. Who's protecting her if not the Jedi? Who else is there? Family? Yeah, that's crazy. Because the family's putting her in danger. If the family's putting her in danger, who else to protect her besides the Jedi? And it's just such a flawed statement because, there's multiple things at play here that Soul is just unaware of or refusing to be aware of.
It really, it comes down to, just not knowing, right? Not knowing the intentions of the Coven. Like, are the Coven dangerous? Are they just trying to live on their own?
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't know their full extent. The Jedi are so not aware of other cultures. They're aware of other cultures, obviously, but they're not aware to the extent and different aspects of these cultures, which makes him, again, Leslie mentioned this in an interview, I think with Nerdist, where she says the Sith, on the other hand, are very curious. They are very wanting of this knowledge. They want so much knowledge about other cultures, other ways of the Force that could help them out. The Jedi, on the other hand, are content with what they know. And when they come across something they don't know, danger, alarms start ringing. But then this is where she says, do not confuse with what Osha wants with what you want. Again, great line. And Dara is very much clocking him. He wants this connection. He yearns for a Padawan. And he's going about it in all the wrong ways, unfortunately. He's not, again, like Nathan said, he doesn't have that Qui-Gon charisma. That
Riz, if you will.
That Riz. There we go.
You're still saying Riz?
I hope not. I'll tell you next school year, see what the kids are saying these days. The next day, though, there's a small scene that I didn't take notice of, but we see Torben meditating shortly before the group comes to give them May and Osha for testing. And it's like, I wonder what Torben's pondering about. Like, I would love for this to be like an episode in a book to see Torben really trying to reflect and be like, I can be better. I can, he's training to shield his mind, which he mentioned later on in the episode, where he says, like, I've shielded my mind. I'm better now. And I wonder, again, if he feels like in the future he's failed because he got his mind invaded. He tried to train his mind against it, but he still follows up on his fears by going back to them later that night.
I think it's kind of clear with his the guilt of his domino effect is like he's the one who ends up rushing off to like, oh, the proof of the virgins, that's our ticket home. Like, that's because he's at his wit's end already, but then also his mind's been invaded and he's just kind of like at a loss, and he's definitely probably uncomfortable on the planet of which his mind was invaded. He just wants to get as far away as possible. Okay, let's just confront this thing, get what we need. We can just go back and I can just get away from all this.
It's so crazy, right? Because his idea is like, the girls are proof. It's like, wait, so what are you saying? You want to take the girls? And like, it's just weird. It's like, let's take them and show them to the Jedi. Here, Osha and May, proof there's a virgin. It's like, what were you thinking here, Torben? But again, I think that's what he's thinking later on as an adult. He's like, what the heck was I thinking? I've caused so much downfall. If I wouldn't have rushed off in the first place, then... Yeah.
Which is interesting, right? Because at this point they already have the blood samples that kind of like have that on paper. Like if you just like send these reports like, hey, here's a bit of proof if you want to explore more, but like, his irrational decision is just like we need to go all in on this so that we can for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. Like he has the blood, he has what he needs, but his irrational fear says we have to get physical evidence.
Which is probably fueled by Soul's mindset as well. Like kids are in danger, if they're not around, then there's no virgins, and it's like, what do we? Is back to Moss? What do we got?
Yeah, I can see that as well. Yeah, for sure. So the next day, Toby meditates. They come here. May fails the test deliberately. I like that we are seeing May's the full extent of May's test. And Indara actually compliments her marking, which I thought was very fascinating. Indara complimented the marking in contrast to Soul being like, why is May marked? And Indara's like, actually, you do like your marking.
It's really nice to see like the Jedi kind of have May open up a bit. Like they're comforting her, even though she comes in with like the determination, like gotta lie, gotta get through this. Because even when we watched last episode, episode 3, when she walks in, she's like, "Ha, I did it. Your turn." But here it's like, look at her. It's just like open up. She's very casual. She's not like really trying to hide any information. She's very like honest about like what the witches are, even though she misquotes, which is interesting, of like the bit about sacrifice.
Yeah, the tragic misquote here. So she says, we love your marking, and is that for a certain ceremony? She's like, yeah, the ceremony is tonight. And they're like, can you explain to me what happens in this ceremony? She says, well, we're supposed to be leaders. This is a process in order for my sister and I to be leaders of the coven. And Dara gives May a look, and she's like, and Dara gives Soul a look. They're kind of confused because they asked, how can children be leaders of a coven? You guys are only children. Well, that's when she answers, well, I don't really know. But my mom did tell me that this whole ascension was to sacrifice ourselves for the coven. And they're like, oh, thank you very much, May. We'll see you later. Cut to red flag, red flag, red flag, sacrifice. What does that mean? And of course, this is only going to fuel Soul's approach to like push Osha onto his side, which is what we get next. So yeah, I did like that mention here where it is a childlike forgetfulness. And just in case somebody in the audience listening to us also doesn't remember, but May never said, or Anastasia never said, sacrifice yourself for the coven. The words were, again, sacrificing a part of yourself for the benefit of the coven. Again, it's more of a metaphorical, spiritual sacrifice. They weren't going to physically be like thrown into the volcano or thrown into the mine of their coven. They were just, again, it's a metaphorical sacrifice. But that's not what the Jedi hear, and it's definitely not what Soul hears. So again, after hearing this, Soul is like more emboldened than ever to save Osha. So when Osha comes to see her test, which again we already saw, he's more pushy towards her. And I like that the camera kind of zeroes out Soul and Osha's conversation, and they pan in on Indara's expressions.
Yeah.
And it really clues us into how different this approach seems to be from our experience of watching episode 3. In episode 3, we're like, okay, Osha is spilling her heart out to Soul, saying like, well, I didn't want to lie. My parents told me to lie, and I want to join the Jedi. And Soul's like, there's thousands of us. If you want to tell the truth, go tell your mom that. Tell the truth. Or be honest, basically, he's saying. And that was a sweet scene. Now it's looked upon a bit differently, in the sense that Indara's like really sensing how pushy Soul is in that conversation prior to her taking the test, or they continue testing, and it's like you can tell Soul is pushing her to fit his agenda. Again, Osha does want to join the Jedi. That is true. Osha, and then Soul, realizes that as well. But at the same time, it's also true that Soul is pushing her towards like doing the thing that he wants / that she should be doing, telling the truth. And Indara kind of clocks him on that. So we'll get it here now. Nighttime, Indara communicates with the council. Soul is pacing back and forth. He's very uncomfortable. And when she comes back outside, Indara says, May and Osha have been declined to join the order from the council. They think it's not right to be separating them from their coven, from their family.
Yeah.
Good call from the High Council. We shouldn't. And he mentions it, and the council mentioned to Indara that they are too old. Soul was kind of shocked by this. He says, but they passed the test. Well, I mean, but Osha passed it. Again, it's just Osha. It's still not May. He's only included on Osha at this point.
Yeah.
He says, but Osha passed the test. And she's like, that is true, but you also pushed her a little bit. And just, they always argue about this whole messiness of the situation. And yeah, Indara declined May and Osha to come to the Coruscant. Separating them is not right. But it is interesting how I wrote it here in my notes. Like this part here creates also creates a what if scenario. Like the Jedi said, we can't do this. What if Soul at that point left, even though Osha does want to go with the Jedi? Like, how does Osha's life change by never leaving the Coven, by never leaving this galaxy? Again, the beauty of Star Wars is that the messiness, the tragedy of the situation, leads to Osha, again, meeting Chimera, meeting the stranger, and experiencing the world in a way that she should have 16 years later. It comes 16 years later, but, through tragedy, through it all, Osha does finally realize her actions or her purpose. So even after this, Torbjorn's like, but the witches are dangerous. And again, this part, we empathize. We saw the way Anastasia got into his mind. And that I can see why he thinks the witches in general are dangerous after getting your mind basically invaded.
Yeah.
And Nara says, Soul, you coached her. When Soul says Osha passed. That's what I meant earlier. And this is probably my favorite line of the episode. She says, do not alter this girl's destiny because you formed an emotional attachment to her, which is a 100% clock by Indara to Soul. And that's tragically, again, what happens in this episode. Soul irrevocably changes and alters this girl's destiny. Maybe her destiny was, and maybe he changes her destiny in a way that like creates a new path for her, which is her current path. But maybe her destiny was to become a Jedi. Maybe the next day, Osha with Anastasia comes to the Jedi compound and says, like, hey, she wants to be with you. Here you go. Even though they got told she couldn't come, at this point, they would have had Anastasia's permission, Soul's affirmation that, like, see, they came, we should take her. And then, they could bring her to the council, which is exactly what happens. So it's like, what could have happened? What could have been?
I think that's the interesting thing about, like, I think destiny kind of implies that, like, something is set to happen regardless, because that's what makes it destiny. It doesn't matter if you engage or not. And I think that's kind of like an interesting bit is like, even if like, a course of their life changes, that would essentially mean it's a part of the destiny already. But also, as you're saying, it seems like Osha was kind of set to be with the Jedi regardless, but through these actions, a worse fate happened due to it that led to it. Essentially, like, we lost a lot of lives that did not need to be lost.
Yeah, destiny is such a fickle concept because, in a way, you're right. Like, destiny means something was always meant to happen. Maybe it was her destiny in a sick way for her to be separated from her sister, and then, the events of the Acolyte happened, of course. But it's like, maybe her destiny was just to be with the Jedi and stay with the Jedi. But, because of Soul's actions, she goes with the Jedi but doesn't stay with them. And that changes her destiny. So it's very finicky. It's very messy. And this whole concept of destiny and choices, which is why I love the episode, a person's choices can alter a person's destiny.
Poison.
a person's destiny, and it's tragic. So again, Soul wants to do his best for Osha without understanding the depths of the situation. He has a fatherly connection to her, and even despite the High Council's warning, he still has that close connection, this bond that he immediately seems to have. And while I was more, shocked by this immediate connection, I was like, is that a flaw of the episode, the writing? But no, again, like, having reflected on it and talking with my dad about it, like the Qui-Gon of it all makes a lot of sense. Qui-Gon was immediately connected with Anakin and emboldened after the midichlorian account scene. And it's very much what we have here, the Anakin and Qui-Gon situation, except in a much more tragic situation. So, and this is where we're going to it. The resorts come back after they're arguing. The twins have an extremely high force count. Their symbionts, which is part of their DNA, are exactly the same. And they're like, well, maybe they're twins. But Corbin says, even if they are twins, the symbionts will be different. And this had my mind going a lot of different places. Theories are now flying everywhere. Nathan, I'm curious to what your take is here. And Dara thinks one consciousness was split into two bodies, which was caused, propelled, elevated by the Virgins on this planet. Leslie went on to say after the show, the Virgins is not Osha and May, unlike Anakin. Anakin as a character, as a being, is a Virgins in the Force. Yeah, because nobody created him.
That doesn't simply mean like the Force brought about Anakin, whereas other people have manipulated the Force to bring.
Exactly. Through the help of Brendock. Brendock creates life. There's Virgins. I like the way that Leslie said it. She said, like, Osha and May are kind of like patient zero in the aspect of creating life. Of course, the later attempt, and it fails because she created two beings, not one.
Which could be like an aspect of like so much power going into one being that could not be withheld, so it had to split evenly into two beings so that it could happen at all.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to find the Virgins quote here. And yeah, like she says here, therefore we came around, and Leslie did talk to Dave Filoni and Pablo Hidalgo about this, which was very fascinating. He said they needed, however, the act of creating May and Osha and Isaiah was going to need amplification. Therefore, we came around to the decision that the Virgins was on Brendock, and that it would remain mysterious. So that way, if we went back there in future tellings of the story, we could uncover a little bit about what is actually there. It was important to note that this type of Virgins was a natural one, as opposed to within a human being or an alien. Human being, of course, Anakin. That makes me curious about getting more information. I think I can't find it. I don't know if I took a picture of it within these quotes, but I believe she said we'll get even more information in the finale about Osha and May's past. So we got information in episode 3 about them being artificially created, information in episode 7 about them being artificially created, maybe split into two. And then I guess episode 8 in the reunion, we'll get some more information. If we do, does that mean like the Sith know something that Osha doesn't?
It might honestly be unveiled via Osha's sensory deprivation in the helmet.
Oh, she might come to a realization that May or Soul don't have.
Yeah, at least in terms of like her own origin, her and May's. And maybe that could even like get stronger like the closer they come together. I don't know. I think at this point though, I would say they're probably different than standard dyad, like we were initially thinking.
Oh yeah. That's a good point. Is the dyad concept still in play?
I think because I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what makes a dyad, but if I were to guess, I think that's probably the idea of like the Force bringing two souls together, whereas this is two souls having to split into different bodies. Um,
But that's if
which
we want to believe in Dara's interpretation that it was a
that's
consciousness
true,
into two.
but
But
I think it also fuels my favorite thing about this story with Osha, trying to find her own identity, and not conformed into this uniform existence. Like the whole thing being like these two people are one, but like they're very different beings. They're very different people, different mindsets, different brains. Even like you look at twins in our world, it's like they're not the same person. Like they may look the same, but like they have different identities, different intrigues.
like me,
Which I always love to like interpret. Like whenever I do see twins, I'm like, it's like, yeah, they look similar, like they do, but like I see different things in their physicality and stuff, and I like to have the different identities differentiated to give the sense of like you're not just carbon copies, you are your own person.
yep, like me and Jalen. Even though we are fraternal, we're not even looking identical.
Sure.
But yeah, we are completely different people. Twins are completely different people, and you're so right. Which is why, like, some theories were like maybe Osha and May fuse together in the finale. I wouldn't like that.
That seems a bit anime.
I don't very much anime. Part of me would really like that because of the anime aesthetic. But I don't know. Osha, while I don't want to rule anything out, if this happens, I will have to go with what the story says or goes with, because it would help them budget wise instead of always cutting
I
between
suppose
Osha and May.
I
But
still episode
I
5
wouldn't.
shot of like the pan around of the hug is so good.
That was so good, yeah. In episode 6, or 5. But yeah, I don't see that happening either, because exactly what you said. By this point, 16 years later, they are such different people, such
Mm.
different experiences, such different lives. It would just feel very, very weird for
You
Ocean and
know,
May to combine.
yeah.
Maybe that's what the Sith wants. Maybe like somebody like Chimere's master. I don't think even Chimere wants that. Maybe like somebody's like Chimere's master or Chimere himself, who was infatuated with this idea of divergence and then of Osha and May, which is why he found them out in the first place.
Yeah.
Maybe he might have wanted that, but then he realized how different May and Osha are, as he said. But you never know.
I will say what I would be intrigued by is if maybe it came down to shared consciousness.
How so?
Like imagine like a reversal. Like whenever we see Ray and Ben connect, they can only ever see each other. They can't really see their surroundings.
I can't see surroundings, just you.
But
so good.
Imagine like if May and Osha reconnect and get on a similar wavelength and are good with each other. Imagine like they're in different points of the galaxy, but like if they wanted to connect and see what the other person was seeing and kind of like get an idea of their surroundings, where they're at, stuff that's going down, shared consciousness, shared knowledge, that would be kind of intriguing, especially in terms of plot wise and storytelling of like uncovering knowledge and situations.
Okay, Nathan, cook.
Like imagine being in a situation of like, person A is in like May is in a situation, only Osha knows about it, and like trying to tell the council, but like they don't believe you and shit.
Yeah, I'll just tease my theory that I was going to share at the end of the episode. But like Osha, Chimera run away from Chimera's Sith, who appears in the finale. May goes off with Mother Coral, who is still alive, who still loves May very much, and they have a weird violent connection. What if throughout season 2 we get the A plot line between Osha and Chimera, the B plot line of May and Coral, and while that is converging, flipping and flopping, Osha and May can see what each other are seeing and experiencing. We'll have a lot of force bond sequences, similar to like what you're saying. Like Osha can see what May is experiencing, May can see what Osha is experiencing. That way, again, similar to how season 1 was structured, you can have Osha and May in different environments, budget and storytelling wise, and that'd be really cool. And they can still like be with each other without being with each other. So that'd be very cool. So yeah, it's By the way, while we were talking, I also found a very cool quote from Leslie about Soul's actions. And as we're getting to a big betrayal moment when Soul kills Isaiah, I like how Leslie says it's more of an emotional betrayal. It's the emotional betrayal, it's the emotional violence that the father figure has embarked on, or this father figure would become a character that slid into an emotionally violent character in Soul. And then how do you create a Jedi who is, who does something irrevocably wrong while also being still good? Like he isn't Darth Vader, but in the context of the story and of his connection to Osha, he's still being this emotionally violent father figure character, the way that Vader was to Luke. Again, not saying Vader's Soul or vice versa, of course. We're just saying in the context of the story and their dynamic, Soul has turned into, via this episode, an emotionally violent character. So let's get into that, because Torben leaves to say, like, we have to go get the kids. That's their proof. And instead of propelling, but instead of stopping Torben from going there, he kind of eggs Torben on, says, like, okay, we're going to go in there. Our objective is the kids' safety. We have to go in there to save Osha and May. And Torben's like, okay, let's go. And they go in there. They come down the steps, and this is when shit hits the proverbial fan, because things do not go good. While Torben and Soul are climbing up the place because everything is locked down, May has locked everything down. Osha, we get while they're on their way, I missed it, but Anastasia has that intimate scene with Osha where she says, I want to go, mommy, basically, with a very sweet scene in episode 3. But again, we saw this scene, but it has so much different weight. It carries more weight now because this act of Anastasia understanding what Osha wants. In episode 3, I was like, maybe Anastasia is saying that, but doesn't actually believe it. Maybe when Osha leaves, Anastasia is going to be like, screw Osha, like, we have to, it's for the Coven. No, this episode doubles down on Anastasia being the morally good character, and she goes to the Coven saying as much, saying like, well, first of all, she says, I understand, I'll talk to the council. She's letting Osha make her choice. And the Coven, very similar to the Jedi, says, the girl's decision is not hers to make, which is what one of the Coven members said. The other members of the Coven agreed, which goes to the quote of, like, they're not children. Like, they're not treating them like children. The Coven here are not treating Osha and May like, children. Just saying, like, it's not their choice to make. They're children. And while this just goes to show both institutions, the Coven and the Jedi, are making these choices for the kids. On Soul Jedi side, saying we have to rescue them, they're in danger. We have to go take them and save them. On the Coven side, the girls must stay with us. It's not her choice, not Osha's choice. It's our choice. Who else? Or how are we going to let them go if they're the future of our country or of our Coven? Not our country.
Well, too real.
Getting a bit too real here. Luckily, it doesn't major happen today.
Everybody is insane. I was like, did you hear the news? And like, what the fuck? Also funny. I don't know if you saw it going around Twitter. There's somebody was sharing around the clip from the trailer yesterday from Captain America of Isaiah Bradley shooting at the president.
No, I didn't see that one.
I was like, oh, that's timing.
Oh, perfect. Marvel's like, what did we do?
Oops. It's like the intern worried about the FBI right now. Who's posted the
Yeah, America, right? What a peaceful country we live in.
Not unlike this Coven.
Not unlike this Coven. So yeah, Osha makes her choice. Coral, we never got what happened with Coral and May when they went on their walk. Well, it turns out Coral says, May, if you want your sister back, I'm paraphrasing again, but like, do whatever it takes to get your sister back. To stay, not to go back, but to stay. And Coral wants May angry. She force pushes May, and this is get aggressive. And they're both acting, both Coral and Soul are acting in an aggressive manner for similar yet different reasons. The protection of the children, and it's going to create all these dangers. So then, Soul peers inside using the Force, which is very cool. There was a moment in episode 3 where he's like, I saw May burn the coven. We're like, you didn't see Jack. You were outside the coven. But we cut to him like peering Professor X style.
I wasn't familiar with your game, so
that was pretty impressive. So when Osha talks to Kaimu Sam, like, my master is very good at finding people. He can do stuff like that, where he can just peer through walls and just be like, I know where she is. I know what's happening here, which is very cool. I
also like also to that point, because I know there was like some stupid people who were like, why didn't the coven send Soul spying on them in their house earlier? Even though, you know, Obi-Wan was spying on Dooku and Attack of the Clones, and nobody knew.
Yeah, they're not all knowing, they're not all powerful. Yeah.
But you also, you know, you maybe want to like, you know, they can have their guard down in their fortress, that they don't anticipate someone climbing a fucking mountain to get into.
Exactly. It's a completely accurate statement there. So Stoll appears inside, they break in, that's how he sees May. May does end up burning the compound. This was interesting. We thought that May's fire, it wasn't possible that it would be able to burn the compound down, but it was. May, in a weird sense of the manner, her fire does end up spreading from May's room to combusting the entire coven castle.
It's an electrical fire, which is totally plausible.
Exactly. It becomes an electrical fire. When we saw it in episode 3, I thought it was like, okay, not plausible. Maybe somebody else caused a fire in the generator. But no, it spreads because, it spreads on the blocks of rock, goes into the electricity or the electrical wires, and then it just spreads uncontrollably.
And it's a very believable scenario because it's a child who, out of emotion, burned this thing that this person who hurt her cares about, and then realized, oh, fuck, I don't have a way to put this out. It's spreading. Oh, God, electrical fire. I don't know what to do. Mom, help. Runs away.
Big time. It's very much like, Mom, help me. I've done something bad, which was, again, spurred on by Coral. If Coral would have took May aside and been like, just be nice to your sister. Don't do that. May probably would have done that. She probably would have still argued with Osha, but she probably wouldn't have burnt her book. Because, again, Coral said, do anything in your power to keep her here. And that's what she does. But, yeah, again, May, despite all that, goes to find help, goes to find her mom. And that's when we get craziness. Coral starts preparing for battle. She says, nobody's leaving this camp. The Jedi are coming. Super protective through violence. Anastasia is nervous. She's nervous about letting Anastasia grow up in an institution. This is when Anastasia comes up to confront the Jedi. They're like, we have noble intentions. Like, we really want Osha. Soul comes to them, says, we are here under noble intentions. Anastasia says, I'm fearful of my daughter living within an institution instead of with her family. It's an accurate fear to have. Even though, again, Jedi have the whole found family complex, but there's still something healthy that's being removed when you're removing them from her family. And then she says, someday those noble intentions will destroy every Jedi in the galaxy, which is basically the quote, the theme of the show. This whole Brendock incident, the New York incident, this whole incident started because of noble intentions from Soul. This ideal that he had noble intentions spawned into protecting this girl, this fatherly bond, this immediate emotional connection, which then spawns into chaos. All, again, starting under noble intentions, which exemplifies to Jedi. Having noble intentions, Qui-Gon, again, having noble intentions to save Anakin, to train Anakin. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to bring his mom. Anakin isn't taught correctly by the Jedi in the most healthy way. And he was primed to get manipulated by Palpatine, and noble intentions caused the downfall of the Jedi Order and chaos throughout the galaxy for years to come. So what we're seeing in Acolyte is just a small sample size of what we'll see in the future. It's very tragic, but it's like a wheel, It always happens.
Like poetry, it rhymes.
Poetry, it rhymes, exactly. It's a Tragedy of errors. So then May comes around the corner, asks for help. Coral sees May, gets in attack mode. Torben sees Coral, get into attack mode. Stupid fly around me.
Me
Anyways,
too, dude.
Coral sees May or sees Torben ignite his lightsaber. Coral versus Torben. Anastasia does not want any violence whatsoever. Turns into a puff of smoke, says stop, basically. Becomes this big smoky creation, slightly spooky. Soul is fearful of it, does not ignite his lightsaber until turns around. He thinks it's, by the way, he thinks it's Osha, not May.
Which is
even a whole other thing. Yeah, exactly. It's like we'll get into that. But yeah, he thinks it's Osha, not May. That makes him even more fearful because, again, he's much more worried about Osha than May. Would he have done the same thing if it was May in danger? We never really know. But either way, he sees Osha he sees May disappearing as some of the smoke, the black wisps of smoke, start coming off of May. They're disappearing. Soul immediately sees that, ignites his lightsaber, and stabs Anastasia and kills her. And Anastasia dies. She says, I would have let Osha go. She chose you. Extremely tragic. I was shocked. This was a crazy, crazy circle of events here. The way that it just escalated and escalated and escalated up until Soul, fearing that Osha was in danger, May was in danger, thinking it was Osha, kills Anastasia. Oof. And if he wouldn't have done anything, Osha would have still been with him, and May would have been safe. Or maybe not. Like, it was always weird. Like, what was Anastasia doing in that instant? I had the theory that Anastasia was just teleporting her and Osha, or her and May away. Leslie said that, like, Anastasia did not want any violence to happen to her legacy, to her coven, and especially to her children. And she wanted to remove May from that. And what it seemed like, it was like, I wonder if I can find the exact quote, because it said, like, she wanted to become one with the Force without killing herself, without experiencing death.
Whoa.
And it was interesting. I'm like, were they both going to die in that instance? Is that what was happening there? I'm trying to think. Can't find it. Twins origins. But while I look for it, it just, one of the quotes, either from this article that I'm reading on Collider right now, or the Nerdist article about, like, what really happened with. I hate these articles where you click on it and it's like, oh, you have to click read more. Anyways, it's like you never really know what really truly happened, but this had a big what's it called? Big High Republic energy, where there's a moment in the High Republic where Elzar Mann does a tragic act, and if he wouldn't have done it, then it would have saved a lot of lives. And who knows, maybe if Soul didn't kill Anastasia, a lot of lives could have been spared here. But because he does, it escalates into so much chaos and so much death. So it was just, oh my God, it was a heartbreaking scene. And you can see that Soul was extremely heartbroken. What was your reaction watching this scene?
It's pretty stuff. I mean, you can find it in the YouTube short, but it's very taken aback. But even not knowing what Anastasia was doing, you could feel immediately Soul's action was the wrong choice, and it was, stunning to not only see that Soul was the direct act for Anastasia's death, but also right in front of May, which was all the more heartbreaking as just hearing May cry out repeatedly. It was very sad, very, very real emotions of a child. But also, I really love seeing the instant regret and guilt on Soul, that even when Coral starts attacking him, he's not really on the offensive ever. He's, maybe like dodging, even like taking some hits, and he's not really reacting to us because he's like, I do deserve this. I'm sorry. but he's fully aware none of his words are going to matter. Coral just as much like calling out to fight, but
fight me.
And he's just like, I won't because I deserve this.
Yeah, it's so tragic. And I finally found the quote, and it's very crazy, right? Because it says, at that moment, Anastasia says or is thinking, her concern is, I do not want my children and my legacy to be affected by something violent. I want to remove them from whatever that is. And she said her and Jody really thought about what was really happening in the scene. And Jody thinks that Anastasia was transforming herself and May into the Force in a way that doesn't kill them, which is interesting. Would they have stayed within as becoming one of the Force, or would they have just dematerialized somewhere else? You never really know. Again, and that's the beauty of this episode. Like, you'll never really know because it never ends up happening. So regardless, the true fact that does end up happening is Soul, the father figure, kills the mother figure in Osha's life. And this act just, again, changes Osha's life dramatically. Like Anastasia said, she would have let Osha go. She wasn't going to be the repressive mother who coddles and who wants to keep Osha nice and safe and, hinder her journey through life. She was going to let Osha take the risk of going with the Jedi away from her family. But because Anastasia dies, so she does end up going with the Jedi, but just through irreparable damage to her early childhood life. Like you mentioned, I just want to say it now. Soul thinks this whole time that was Osha. It's not until May comes up there and screams, like, what did you do to Soul? He looks at her and sees the marking. He's like, oh, shit, that was May, not Osha. Mm-hmm. And again, I think, A, he probably still would have done the same thing. But B, this is not his first time confusing May for Osha. He's done this a couple of times now. In this sequence, he confuses her with May. Then, of course, in the present time, when May confuses Soul on purpose after the events on Kofar. As multiple times, Soul has kind of confused Osha for May. And then I think Leslie really touches on that in this quote from Collider and from Nerdist, because both interviewers asked her the same question, like, Soul, for somebody that has such an emotional connection to Osha, mistaked May for Osha a couple times now, twice in the series. What does this mean? It means that, Soul doesn't have that kind of special connection that he thinks he does have with Osha. And what Leslie says is that it's interesting that Chimere, the stranger, has the same experience with her in episode 2. The second that Osha walks into the apothecary, Chimere knows that it's not May. He can feel it. He can feel that there is something different about her. He can feel that he wants to teach her. Chimere wants to be a part of Osha's journey in reaching her full potential, as we saw with episode 6. What I think is interesting is that Chimere and later the stranger never mistakes Osha for May, and Soul mistakes Osha for May at least 2 times. That's also meant to foreshadow who Osha's real master will be. Leading to the finale, of course, it's a big, not a big spoiler, but a slight spoiler. And then somebody asked about Indara thinking Soul's emotions and feeling like they're getting in the way. Who's right and wrong? We kind of already talked about that ourselves in terms of like, it's hard to quantify right and wrong. Soul going into this whole action of, I have to go save the children, seems right. Like Nathan said earlier, if we're living in a vacuum, if Soul is not watching what the audience is watching, if he's just seeing from his perspective, they could be in danger. In an isolated situation, they could be in danger. And how many times have the Jedi Council hindered people from, stopping them from doing the right thing? In this instance, Soul thought he was doing the right thing. It's not until Anastasia that he knows he did the wrong thing, which is like the biggest sin that Soul commits. But either way, this heartbreaking scene gives way to a awesome, but still a tragic scene where Kelnaka comes into play. and Kanaka's mind controlled, like you talked about, and the Coven. It takes all members of the Coven. There's Coven spread all across the bridge, all across the Coven, and it comes to a shot where there's like at least 3 rows of Coven witches having to work together to possess Kaonaka. Even though it only took Insea to, take over Torben. And this is something that,
you can only imagine how that went, right? It's just like, even though Coral seems to be a bit of a catalyst for this, I don't think Kaonaka was willingly letting anybody take over his mind. But if you can imagine multiple people berating his mind to let them in, something we don't see, but like you can picture that's probably how it went down. If this many people are connected, that holy shit, that's kind of frightening and like claustrophobic, that your mind being overtaken by all these voices until you're just like have to give in.
Yeah, like I'm with you on that. Like all these voices coming in, invading his mind, it really elevates what we see in episode 4 with Kaonaka writing all these things on, the compound that he's at when he walks away years later. We can imagine maybe that all the Coven invading his mind, that has to linger in his mind. And it's something we thought about back then a few weeks ago, but it's really cemented now. It's like, oh my God, all those Coven witches, at least a couple, 30, 40, 50 people invading his mind, that's going to stick with you. And maybe it didn't hit with him early, right after the incident, but later on he goes to seclude himself on Kofar. And that moment really scarred Kaonaka, which is, it's already tragic. And then compounding this with an awesome fight sequence is just, it had me feeling all types of ways. But I love, just, to summarize the fight here, I love how weighty Kaonaka's lightsaber dueling felt. Like Soul and Torben kept deflecting. It looked visually stunning. You can really feel the weight whenever they deflected Kaonaka. It's just stumbling with every block. And then the sequence of Kaonaka pulling Torben with the force, then slamming him against a wall, bleeding, barely blocking with one hand. It was
that. If you've ever tried that shit is hard.
How do you? Yeah, I'm shocked that Torben's arm just didn't break and Konaka just continued to slice him in half. Because if he wouldn't have blocked right there, Torben's body is going in two. Because it's just going to cut his body.
The pressure of you should be dipping in. That's really hard to maintain.
That's really hard. One hand while getting your face crushed against a rock. It's like, Torben, I applaud you. And maybe there was a part of Konaka that was stopping himself too from fully committing to that attack. Because again, like Nathan said, I feel like Konaka could have been like, wow, and just could have broke Torben's arm and just cut him in half. But it was a horrible sight to see. And Soul comes in like, Konaka, stop it. And
no.
Konaka, no. Kal-El, no.
No.
sorry, Soul. But Soul doesn't work. He gets pushed aside. It's not until Indara high jumps it. And I watch a lot of track and field. When you do a high jump, it's 1, 2, then you jump. I mean long jump. 1, 2, and then you do this big jump. I love how Indara just comes across 1, 2 hops, gets on him, and really starts helping his mind there. But my one flaw with the episode, my one criticism, this scene here. Now she's struggling. Indara's struggling to get Konaka back to normal. Mm-hmm. She's using the force. She finally breaks the connection, severs the connection. The coven falls. From my perspective, it looks like A, they're passed out, and B, Indara's expression is not one of horror of, oh shit, I just killed 30 people, at least. Yeah. It's more so if I input that in my mind that, oh, she just killed people, I can kind of visualize Carrie Ann Moss acting that way, but it still comes across as more. For me, it seems more like she's exhausted. But then, Leslie was asked point blank, did Indara kill them? She's like, yeah, inadvertently, she killed them by severing their connection to Konaka. That makes complete sense. I even wrote that the night of that happening. I was like, it seems like she accidentally killed them. But I think visually, they could have done a better job I don't know, of having Indara be like more horrified by her actions, even though I know Indara is not that kind of character. Maybe that was the excuse they went with. But I felt like they could have gone with Indara being more shocked by it, and for the Coven, have their eyes circle the back of their head, something like that, like of like cementing that they're dead.
There is some visual language they could have done in some edits. Because you remember when in episode 5, when May's running through the forest and we get that almost like full close up frame of Chimair's mask, like coward, like calling her out, like those quick cuts. Like imagine if like as Indara is doing that, like we got like quick cuts of like the connection severing for like different members of the Coven, like falling back, and it's like, oh shit, there's an impact to this,
like a domino effect, right? Yeah. Where it's just like boom, 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 boom. You're like, oh shit, like they just died. Yeah, you're right. Like it would have been more visceral if we got a close up of them, but from us, it just saw like they're just like boom, and I'm just like, oh, did they pass out and then die from the fire? Leslie did say like it's up to people's interpretations, like. Sure. Other people could think that like, oh, they did die or they did like pass out, but then the building burns and breaks down. But this is what happens when May is running. Yeah. When May is running, we hear that big boom and shouts like, oh! I remember us theorizing that, oh, there might have been a huge explosion with the Jedi and the Coven. Yeah. Not what happened. There was just literally just a big explosion because of the spreading of the fire, and then the people died from the rubble and from the explosion itself, the fire itself. So they could have just died from that as well. The loss of air, loss of oxygen, sure. Explosions, rubble, even if they were passed out. I get that. But for me, I think the scene would have been more impactful being like, if she's like, oh my God, like I just did this. I just killed 30 people. To be fair on Indara, though, her number one worry was helping Konaka. She's completely unfamiliar with how this other force power works. Yeah. And she just severed it, not knowing the implications. Unfortunately for the Coven, it takes a lot of them to control one Jedi because they're a lot weaker than the Jedi. Yeah. And because of their united connection, they all get killed in a united manner. Very tragic, very sad, but I think, again, it could have been elevated just a little bit more. But anyways, at the end of the episode, I talked about it earlier. We get one of my favorite scenes when I'm about to skip over the entire May scene. But anyways, we get to Osha and May bridge scene, and like I've been teeing up for the entire episode, I think Sol really kind of already made his decision by that point. He already knew he was going to save Osha. With the way he was so much more worried about her, the way he had this mysterious connection with her, and the way he disliked May's marking, felt like she was too far gone, in my opinion. And I think that, unfortunately, even though he truly did want to save both, when it came down to it, he knew he was already, if he couldn't, he was going to save Osha over May.
It's just pain in his struggle.
You can, and it's so when the way he's controlling that.
The desperation, he so deeply wants to be able to have the strength to hold both bridges, but he physically cannot, and he knows he can hold up and support at least a little bit one of them. And it's an unfortunate situation. It's a situation nobody wants to be in. Evan, if it was you, who would you have chosen?
I'd be like, y'all both got to go. Sorry. No, I'm kidding. No, I don't know what I would have done. But, if I was Sol in a situation, I understand why he chose Osha. There are people on Twitter being like, well, if he just would have just held up the bridge and then, what is the stupid theory? Like, held up the twins themselves instead of holding up the bridge. I just hate people who, again, these what if stupid scenarios where it's just like, well, if the Jedi did this, I'm like, you can say that for every other Force scene. And somebody mentioned Attack of the Clones where it's like, why didn't Yoda pull Obi-Wan and Anakin instead of holding up the big tower that fell on Obi-Wan and Anakin? It's like
nobody thinks this fast in these intense situations.
Nobody does, and the Jedi aren't all powerful. They can't do everything. They're fallible. That's what this whole show and the prequels are about: flawed characters, flawed powers, and when you have to make these instant decisions, you don't think correctly or anything. You're hardly thinking at all. Yeah. So also made the scene so tragic. But you're right, the desperation on Lee Jung-jae's acting, impeccable, outstanding. And it gets even better because after he saves her, they go to the ship, the ending scene, and Soul Nathan is not apologetic, which I was like, oh my god, like, at least in my opinion, because like Indara explains how she's pissed off at Torben, and Soul is saying, I warned you both to not interfere. You guys did not understand the consequences of your actions. And Soul, not apologetic, says, I had to make, name of the title of the episode, I had to make a choice. And then he walks up the steps, and Indara comes up to him, and they had the physical scuffle. And I loved it. You can see Carrie-Anne Moss's anger, Soul's defiance expression, and Dara's bubbling anger, which is bubbling up the entire episode from him disobeying her in the beginning to arguing to that whole test with Osha and May didn't go the way she wanted. It's been bubbling up. And then Soul was still defiant after everything that happened. And she's just like, and I loved it. They're like grabbing at each other. And finally they just grab. And then Torben's like, guys, stop it, basically. And you can see the hurt on her face. I think, in my opinion, she's like, I trusted you so much. And you're still not like you're not owning up to your actions here. But she's also very sad. And Soul is also very sad. It's very raw, angry scene. It's like you just arguing with your best friend who just did something very wrong. You both did something very wrong, and Dara knows what she did too. So it's just like a huge, messy, and raw situation. I really loved that from both of them, Carrie-Anne Moss and Lee Jung-jae. So yeah, they go with like, we'll have to tell Torben says, so what do? We tell the council what truly happened. May burned down the compound, which did happen, and everyone was lost, which did happen, but not because of May. So, and then Soul's like, are we sure that's what we go with? And she says, another one of my favorite quotes, after everything this little girl has lost tonight, you will take away her dream as well. And what makes this quote so good, guys, is because Soul inadvertently has already taken away her dream. Her dream was to become a Jedi. In the future, she can't stay a Jedi. So much so that Indara eventually is like, she's not fit to be a Jedi, and B, Osha walks away. She leaves because she couldn't handle it, as she tells Chimera. She failed. This was her dream.
A little bit. If like in that, we don't know what happened in those like that 6-year training period with Osha, but it makes you wonder, like, did Indara make this suggestion to break off Osha's training because of Osha herself or because of Soul?
It could be both. Yeah. Could be both. Yeah, it could be like, you're saying Soul in terms of separating Soul from Osha?
Yeah, possibly. And more so, and if he is going to remain a teacher, pair him with somebody else, such as Jackie, who he doesn't know.
Yeah. I would love, I'm not expecting it in a season 2, but if we could see Indara's version of that, bring Carrie-Anne Moss for a surprise scene of her separating Osha from May. I don't know how much the series is actually going to get into those missing years, but it could be a fun way to bring back Charlie again as Yord, to get some flashback between Yord and
Jackie.
Osha. Maybe not Jackie, but because Osha just met Jackie.
That's true. That's true.
But yeah, maybe Osha and Yord scenes in the past. I'm trying to think, can we see Jackie again?
If you have like, if Soul survives and he's like reflective on those he's taught, then maybe
from Soul's perspective, that'd be great.
Or even like having perspective of like his mindset of Osha not being there anymore as he's training Jackie. Yeah. And then cut to the present where he's lost them both.
Where he's lost them both in a broken Soul in season 2. I would love that. So there's a lot of fascinating ways Soul could live and be really good. I've risen on Soul dying though. And we'll get to it now because that's the end of the episode. Before you throw yourself at the mercy of the High Council, consider why you made the choice in the first place, Indara tells Soul. And again, this is the burning consequence of their lie, of lying to the High Council. And they do. The High Council does go on to, or at least somebody does, go on to share the Osha, or to delete that Osha ever had a sister or a twin sister on the files. But Osha does share that she did have a sister. She tells George as much. So I think you can assume Indara or somebody's soul maybe went in and deleted the fact that she had a twin sister, but Osha is free to say that she did have a sister, just not what happened to him. Or people, Osha does publicly share that her parents died, that her sisters died, but not that they were twins. That was the big reveal there. Episode end with Soul telling Osha the lie as we head into the finale. And one of my biggest quotes here is from Leslie saying, or just paraphrasing the quote, but, Luke reacted, to his father's betrayal, the betrayal of the father in a way that was healthy. He saw what was best in Vader. There's still light in him.
Yeah.
That's not how Osha's going to react, guys. I don't think Osha's going to come out the better person in terms of like, you know what, Soul, I understand what you did. I understand what happened here. I'm trying to find a quote from the Acolyte here. Let's see.
I mean, just when you like think back to the first episode when she's having that PTSD moment of the fire on the ship being a mech, and just thinking back to it all, it's like that's clearly plaguing her all this time later to the present. And granted, she always blamed May, but now like the idea of like shifting the blame, having this resentment for somebody who she thought dead for so long, then brought back into the fold, and then realized, oh, my blame was never with you, it was with the person I arguably trusted most in the galaxy.
Every time, like, even when she saw May at the end of episode 5, she was like, you killed everyone. Like, I can't trust you. The Jedi told me you burned everybody. And May's reaction was just like, they brainwashed you. And now Osh has to realize that she was wrong. There's no worse feeling. People have gone through this throughout their entire lives. There's no worse feeling when you're arguing with somebody and then after the fact, you realize I was wrong. They were right. Like, you feel like shit.
Yeah. But then also, especially this different context of like, you were wrong and it was the person you would trust most. And now who's over your shoulder right now? It's Chimera.
Yep. Chimera, right there. Oh, it's juicy as hell. And I found the quote where Leslie says, Luke deals with the betrayal of the father. And the way he deals with that in Return of the Jedi is that he is a Jedi like my father before me. And it makes his decisions about that betrayal and the repercussions of that the stuff of history, the stuff of legend. In our show, we have a character that's going to find out about the betrayal of the father, and we're going to see how she deals with it. And that's it. So we're going to see how she deals with it. How do you think she's going to learn about this? I still think my theory is still possible. We could jumpstart episode 7 or 8, the finale, with her removing the helmet and being like, I understand now. Or she just becomes more connected with the Force at the beginning of the episode 8 with Chimera there. They get to the planet. They confront. I don't know what planet they're going to confront them on. Are they going to go back to Kofar? They're going to go back to Brendok? We'll see. I kind of would like it if they went back to Brendok.
This is kind of like the question though, because as of right now, Soul said he was going to have words with May. We've yet to see these words. It's kind of
the flashback were the words, yeah.
Which is fair, to at least like explain the side of like how the Jedi came to do that, but it doesn't really change what May already believes, which is the truth that Soul killed her family, which is also all the more insane when you look back to episode 6 of like when Soul hugs May thinking it's Osha. It's insane looking at that perspective because it's Soul after Soul lost everybody that he had, and all he has left is who he thinks is Osha, hugging May, who is like, this is the man who killed my mother and caused all of my family to burn and die. Well, not killed, but brought everybody.
I didn't even think about that because, we talked about that scene, that look on May's face is like, oh, she hasn't felt this affection in a long time. Well, that still is the case. It's like, yeah, it's even worse when the killer of your mother is the one hugging you after he just lost his family. You're like, oh, now you know how it feels, basically. Oof. But yeah, so you bring up some good points. Again, I still think like this episode was for example, May is watching this episode. She has the Blu-ray disc. She has Disney Plus. She's watching this episode. She might not be seeing like the Osha and Asaya conversation like we did. She might not be seeing the what else did Soul just not see? Most of the stuff that Soul did not see, May did experience herself. But but basically, I think May is gonna clue in the pieces. And yeah, now that we know, and if our reactions were like, Soul, damn, then May's reaction is gonna be more like, Soul, damn, like get me out of these handcuffs. I want to beat you up. So I think May is gonna be very angry. Like, we all figured that, or at least I did, that May would become more understanding after this finale or this reveal. I don't think so anymore. But, because like you said, it does reinforce what she already believed. But at the same time, it's coming from a person who's visibly guilt-ridden over that, which brings it a tinge more of sorrow.
I think at least at the moment right now where we're at, as the episodes will start for the finale, is like Soul's probably going to have it broken down of like, what is more important to you, May? Is it coming after me or saving your sister from the one you ran away from?
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, that's a good point. It's like she can be angry, she can understand and be angry. Those two things can concur, can be together. And at the same time, yeah, she can get the ultimatum like, okay, I'll work with you, Soul, to get my sister back. The consistent thing about May has always been her love for her sister and her fear of the stranger, especially after he murdered everybody and he tried to murder her. So she's thinking, Soul is thinking, the stranger has May as a prisoner. We have to go rescue her. Nathan, a fucking tragedy is that Osha does not need saving. She isn't going anywhere. Granted, Osha and May will have a reconciliation, 1,000,000,000%. Osha is not going to react kindly to Soul. And my question is, how much does Chimera know about the story? Does Chimera know as much that Soul killed Anastasia?
I think he at least knows the side of things, which is probably at least the majority of it. He doesn't know the Jedi reasoning of how it all came to be, but he knows the events.
You're right. I'm stupid. May saw Soul kill Anastasia. May told Chimera as much. Yeah. Soul, the Asian Jedi, the guy that I saw with my sister, that person is the one that killed Anastasia. Chimera will know this girl was definitely telling the truth. I can warp that. I can use that. And he did. But again, as Chimera states, he didn't know that, as directly what he said, I thought May was in it the same way I was, but he didn't realize her goal was just so like she could be with Osha, was around Osha and not around the Jedi as an institution. Chimera's thing is much larger. It's with the Jedi as a whole, while May is much more personal. The beauty of Osha in his mind is, well, outside of her own beauty itself, is that Osha can be used not as an emotional, like not as emotional, because he does have that soul reveal he could use, but also with the Jedi itself. She came from the Jedi. She understands the workings of the Jedi, and she can complement his issues that he's been having with the Jedi. But yeah, the fact that Osha does not want to leave Chimera, I'm standing by that, and I think it's going to make for a more tragic finale. What's going to happen when she says no to Soul? Soul is not just going to walk away. Is Osha just going to say no? But how is Osha going to lash out at Soul? How is that going to be visualized? I don't know. Osha, again, has been such a light, positive character this season. We're in for, the title is called Doom, guys. We're in for some dark shit. We're in for some dark. It's called Doom.
Oh, Caleb
Doom. Where are the Space Wolves? No. Yeah, not great, Bob. Chimera, how is Chimera going to react to it all? Are we getting Chimera versus Soul round 2? I think we are getting a lightsaber battle of some sorts.
Probably.
Probably.
May versus Osho for some reason.
May versus Osho for some reason. Looks like it was kind of like a replay of May versus Jackie. That was kind of fun.
Oh, that could be a good way to reveal though. Is like Osha going against May, but then May breaking down during some clashing of like it really like. Do you actually know what happened? Wasn't Soul going to tell you? And Soul being on the sidelines, like, or maybe Soul while fighting Chimera side by side is like, fuck, and Chimera's like, go and tell him.
Yeah, great point. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, Osha is finally going to use the Force. The running through line has been like, Osha, you're terrible at blocking. You've always been terrible at blocking. I can see Osha finally like successfully blocking and successfully aggressively using the thread, using the Force. So we have yet to see Osha actually use the Force in this season. So again, guys, we're going to get a reverse angle of Rey coming into her own in The Force Awakens. Rey, very similar to Force Awakens, he went into a dark forest, interacted with the stranger / Kylo, comes out of it stronger than before. You can kind of think of Rey's interrogation scene with Kylo as Chimera's interrogation of Osha's true desires in Episode 6. But then at the end, Rey catches the lightsaber, beats up Kylo Ren. Is Osha going to use the lightsaber? Maybe, maybe not. But she will use the Force, and she will, again, lash out against Soul in some verbal or visual way. So, two minds here. If Soul does die, that's it. It's tragic. But I would be... I would hate it, but I would understand it. I don't know. Emotionally, I'd be like just gutted because he's such a great character. But there's also a very fascinating route of him living, about just him living with the
survivor's guilt.
Survivor's guilt of like, my Padawan died and my other Padawan left me in Osha. And also the Jedi still think I'm a murderer. Let's bring up the Vernesha of it all. Vernesha is going to become a player in this finale. There was some a website just opened up about her robes and the costume designs of the Acolyte. There was a costume of Vernesha in some white senatorial robes or something like that. We could see one final short council scene wrapping up Vernesha's investigation. Could it end with them pinning it on Soul as he leaves? Maybe, maybe not. But again, I just want to... Well, I can't say again because I haven't mentioned it yet. But like, I want to close things up by saying I don't think there are a lot of things to get wrapped up here in this finale. Osha and May reconciliation. Osha, May, Soul as a triarchy reconciliation. Anything related to Chimera, not relevant. In terms of Chimera's past, the Osha Chimera dynamic is going to be peak. Again, I'm ready for that. Leslie already said Chimera will reveal more about himself in episode 6, which we already saw he did, in episode 8. She didn't say episode 7 because episode 7 is a flashback. But she said that in the after the math of episode 5. She was like, you'll learn more about Chimera in episode 6 and 8. So we'll learn more about something about him in episode 8. What will that be? His Sith freaking master. It's coming. It's happening. Is it going to be an alien? What?
I don't think it'll pop up in the climax at this point. I think he may be teased.
Tease, something like that. Yeah, I can't wait. I'm excited. It's going to be gnarly. I'm hoping, prayer circle is still alive for Soul. But, as Leslie said, as other people have said, if you come into contact with the Sith, there's only usually one outcome: death. What does Thanos say? You can run from it, but it always leads back to me. I don't know, whatever it's called.
Destiny arrives all the same.
Destiny, guys. Thanos knew. He knew the show. Destiny choices. Anyways, that is it. We're only days away from Acolyte Eve, days away from the Acolyte finale. I can't wait. I'm going to miss this show so much. And we went on for 2 hours and 20 minutes, a bit longer than I thought. I'm worried if we're going to go for 3 hours for this finale. There's going to be so much to say.
I'm proud because there's gonna be like so many like things in like the existing overall arcing narrative to discuss. What happens in the finale alone, and also the open door of what could come, what will come in the seasons.
We've been ranking our movies on Letterboxd for the commentaries that we've been doing. Again, go watch those. But I'm very curious to rank where the series will be for me at the end of it all. Because I have so much freaking fun talking with Nathan about all this every week, every single week. It's so sad. Next week's gonna be our last, not our last, but our last Acolyte season 1 discussion for now. It's right up there with Andor. I love this show so much and the conversations it brings. And hopefully we get that season 2 announcement at D23 or at Japan at the latest. Hopefully they haven't announced the Acolyte cast is coming, but please bring Amanda, Manny, Sol, Jackie, Legion J, Daphne, Charlie, Barnett. Bring the whole cast there so I can actually go there and make sure I saw their interviews this time. Because I remember in Anaheim, I think were we in the crowd when they were talking with the Star Wars?
Or were they at the or that Europe?
I thought they were there. Am I making up a false narrative in my mind? I thought they were in Anaheim.
Because Celebration Europe was last year, and then now they're.
But
we have the show.
Or they were in Anaheim. Am I going crazy, Nathan? I'm pretty sure they were in Anaheim too.
I don't recall.
Am I going crazy?
Because I'm like, didn't Amanda cosplay as Padme last year?
I thought that was at Anaheim. Acolyte in Star Wars.
They just have such a similar stage they build every time.
Maybe that's why. Celebration.
Yeah, the open Star Wars show stage, they just kind of assemble it.
Anaheim. Amandala 2023. What's today? 2024. I mean, maybe you're right. So yeah, they're talking. This is London. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm just crazy.
It's okay.
It's not okay. I'm going crazy.
It's fine.
April 7th, 2023. Dang it. Anyways, Nathan's right, guys. What a shocker. Anyways, I'm making sure I'm seeing Amanda and them in Japan.
Nice.
I hope they come so they can.
You gonna do some meet and greets?
I want to say no. If Amanda is doing a meet and greet, then I'll probably say yes. She's the only one.
What's your What's preferred? Do you want to get a photo or do you want to go to a signing if they do it? Because I think you get more time to discuss anything if you're signing Gwen's picture. It's like, hey, what up? I love you. Pose, you're out. Okay,
then I'll do signing then. I'll
but then you have the memory forever because I don't think you can take photos at this time.
I don't know then, Nathan.
You get both.
I'll probably do
bankrupt.
Again, I'll only do this. I'll only go bankrupt if it's Amanda Stenberg on the call sheet. I don't need to see Hayden. I don't need to see if Daisy shows up. That's probably another one. Daisy and Amanda. That's it. That's my ask.
Adam's here. Oh shit.
That's I don't even say Adam because there's no way in hell
he would never do this.
He would never do this. Go to Japan for one day for one signing for some money? No. Yeah, he'll never do that. He's too busy.
Which is so funny in hindsight because back in 2019, the day before the Tross trailer, me and Co. Went to go meet Ian McDiarmid, and we was like, "Oh, he's just here, cool," for no reason. Next morning, cool. Roll it again.
Yeah, roll it again. So yeah,
go check out our reaction to the episode 9 trailer.
Please do that. It's one of Nathan's best videos.
It's one of Evan's best. Is what's going on?
Thank you. I'm pretty sure we're gonna be saying that in the Acolyte finale. So catch us next week. Catch Nathan's YouTube short about next week's finale. I'm pretty sure it'll be great.
Or I'm like, I'm training for 3 hours. I'm like, how the fuck do I fit all this? 1 minute. I just do a part 2, yes, but I won't.
You can make multiple shorts, motherfucker.
I know, I literally can, but I don't know.
Anyways, Find me on Twitter, Harris EV9. I'm playing Elden Ring. I'm watching anime. I watched this fantastic anime today. It came out today called Too Many Losing Heroines. It's about this middle school boy who comes across these 3 middle school or high school girls who are going through rejection. And it's hilarious. It's also very dramatic. And it's just a fantastic like slice of life anime. So summer anime has been very good. If you're not watching your anime on Crunchyroll, go right ahead and do it. Anyways, I'm watching anime, playing Elden Ring. Next weekend, when we talk about Acolyte, I will not just be talking about Acolyte. I will be tabbing the live feeds because Big Brother comes back next Wednesday, 2-part premiere. Next Thursday is when the live feeds start, which sucks because apparently they're moving in on Tuesday, so they're gonna be in the house for 2 days before I get to see them. Oh. Anyways, yeah, so I'll be obsessed for the rest of the summer. My summer is coming to an end, proverbially. So yeah, that's it for me. This is my last weekend of freedom. Nathan, where can they find you?
Do you go back to school?
No, I'm watching the live feeds.
Oh, that's
I'm be glued to the screen. That's it. I don't go back to school until August 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, something like that. Second week in August. Yeah.
Well, you can find me at _TimeBlazer, making a show called Time Blazer with co-star and creative consultant Evan Harris.
That's me playing Ben, who is the Indara of the group.
That's fair.
Oh, okay.
That is the fairest you've been in the last like month. I'm trying to compare to the topic.
Love it. Cool. Great. Cool.
That is maybe the most accurate you said. We'll see.
That's how we do it, baby.
If you guys enjoy this, make sure you like button, subscribe now, right? Ring the bell so you miss future coverage on all things Star Wars. That being said, hope you have a great day, and may the Force be with you always.